gratitude to Chris and Trudy, who's on the remote, and also Kimmy for all that they do behind the scenes to make this go. A lot of effort that goes into it on their part. And we want to thank our mayor for joining us tonight. No stranger to any of us. But tonight we really have a pretty light agenda. This is the last night that I will facilitate any agenda to you, because this is truly your committee working under the mayor and the citizens of Pensacola. But going forward, after you elect your chair tonight, that responsibility of agenda formulation will fall under his or her leadership and your prerogative. So we'll just take a full advantage of my last opportunity to do that tonight. And when you look at your agenda, like I said, it's pretty brief. The first thing we want to do tonight is for you to elect your chair and your co-chair. And that person, chair-wise, will sit in the student seat. We can do this one of two ways, and it's your prerogative how you would like to do it. We can do it just by a show of hands. We have a total of 4 nominees for the position of chair and or co-chair. Some are self-nominated and others were nominated. And I'll read those in a minute. If anyone chooses to decline, we can take care of that. And then we can do the vote by show of hands, or if you would prefer, we have prepared ballots to do it that way. So, let me ask the first question. Who would, is show of hands okay with everyone? Okay. The nominees are Dr. Joseph Marshall, Chair, Autumn Blackledge, Dr. Autumn Blackledge, Dr. Kyle Cole, and Dr. Jonathan Green. Is there any refusal of nomination, or anyone that wants to be added to or make another nomination?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Are we voting on co-chair also, or does whoever's voted? Okay, so we're voting for co-chair. Okay.
Separate vote. Yes.
Do we have a nominee for that position?
For the
Co-chair position?
For the co-chair position? No, matter of fact, I think all was nominated for chair position.
I was more so nominated myself for the co-chair position.
Co-chair?
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
I do not want to serve as the chair. I am willing to serve as the co-chair.
Okay.
I think I nominated for co-chair.
Was it? Oh, okay. All right. So now we have 4 nominations, 2 for co, and two for chair, and 2 for co-chair. For chair, we have Dr. Joseph Marshall, and we have Kyle Cole. Those are 2 nominations for chair. And our 2 nominations for co-chair will be Dr. Autumn Blackledge and Jonathan Green. Any other nomination changes? Or
What was the co-chair?
Say again?
What was the co-chair?
Co-chair Jonathan Green and or Autumn Black.
Okay. Scott, what did you just say? Were you nominated for something?
I nominated all of them co-chair.
Okay.
Any other changes? Okay, that being the case, are we prepared to vote?
Can we hear a statement from each of the nominees, just as far as
Absolutely.
what their thoughts are on this and
Okay.
what their
The
plans?
request was to have brief statements by each of the nominees. Any other requests?
Well, I do have one request regarding the chair.
Whoever chairs, I think it's very important they make every effort to be here live.
Yeah.
That's the first choice.
Yeah.
And then if something comes up, then alternatively, chair really need to be here.
Any other comments? Okay, being none, let's move with our first nominee for chair, which is Dr. Joseph Marshall. Those in favor for Dr. Joseph?
Statements.
I'm sorry?
Statements.
Oh, I'm trying to rush this thing. Dr. Marshall, your floor. Dr. Marshall?
Hello, greetings. This is a test to make sure that everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Greetings to each of you. Certainly, I'm first and foremost honored to be given the opportunity to be considered as chair for this Citizens Committee. Let me just say first and foremost that I've always lived by a principle that the higher you go, the lower you should go. And that is making certain that you are humble in everything that you do and also represent the people in which you have become a part of that august body. And so with that being said, being a native Pensacolian, having the convictions of this city, having myself served 23 years in the military, being a former Blue Angel, serving as the administrative officer, having an opportunity to as well recruit in this area, as well as serving on numerous other boards and what have you, I do believe that I have the navigational skills in order to lead in a way that would be pleasing, not only to those of which I'm peers with, but also for the city of Pensacola for our greater good. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Now we'll hear words from Calco.
How everybody doing? Good. Once again, it'd be an honor. It's an honor to be considered for the position as well. I really don't have a long, extensive background when it comes to this type of work, but I can tell you I got the passion to get the job done. I want to see change in this city, and I'm willing to give it 110% for whatever we got to do. I've been running my own nonprofit now for a few months, been running my own business for 6 years. So like I said, I have the passion to see change in this city. I've been doing it head on, hitting the streets every day since I've started. And hey, I'm gonna see this thing to the end.
We can continue with words from the co-chairs as well, and then go right into the voting for both positions. If that's okay. Autumn.
Hi, I'm Autumn Blackledge for you guys who have not met me really before outside of this committee. I am a lawyer. It doesn't make me particularly skilled at being able to lead or help lead a group like this. I am very convicted that I have been given a lot of privilege over the last 44 years here that I haven't done much with, and I'm sick of that. And so I am willing to do whatever it takes to become educated using, whatever organizational skills that I can bring to this committee. I'm happy to do that. I only want to do that if the committee believes that it will be helpful to the goals, which I think that we are all here for.
Thank you, Autumn. Jonathan.
All right, my name is Jonathan Green, and I have a background in criminal justice, where my undergraduate degree and my master's of science were in criminal justice. So understanding the system for community-oriented policing is something that I've always had a passion for since my undergraduate studies. And I also have my law degree, my Juris Doctorate. So being able to, I don't practice law, and a large part of not practicing law was to take the legal knowledge that I obtained to put it on a grassroots level. And serving on this committee is one of the most grassroots levels in which one can serve. And being able to apply that mind is the reason why I want to serve as your co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions from the committee as a whole?
I just have one quick question. I guess this is for Reverend Marshall. Do you anticipate being able to to come to future meetings? I know, not saying you can't be remote, but as Dr. Alexander mentioned, it would be great from my perspective as well to have someone physically here.
Yes, sir, indeed, that would be the case. I want to make it publicly known for what it's worth because I have been able to overcome it, and it's somewhat very personal, but I had cancer, and I beat it. I was in a bout with it, and I knocked it out. And so, with that being said, I have taken the precautions, but I do have every intention on being there in person, taking the necessary precautions.
Thank you.
Any further questions? There being none, we'll proceed with the vote. By show of hand, those in favor for Dr. Joseph Marshall as the CPAC chair, do so by showing your hand. Any opposed? There being none, for consideration for Chair Kyle Cole, those in favor, please raise your hand. Committee, I tally a total of 6 votes for yes for Dr. Joseph Marshall and 2 for Kyle Cole. The majority of votes elect Dr. Marshall as your chair.
I think there are actually 3 votes.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's what I had too.
For Kyle Cole?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed one on the screen, I'm sorry.
I voted for Kyle.
All right, got you, Charles. Sorry about that. I'll restate the total, 6 for Dr. Marshall and 3 for Kyle Cole.
11 people here.
I know someone covered his vote. Okay, so majority of votes again go to Dr. Joseph Marshall as your newly elected chair. Applause appropriate.
Mr. Powell,
Yes, sir.
if I could just interject and insert that I want to publicly as well commend Kyle for the work that he has done here in the city of Pensacola. I've had the opportunity to be there in a quiet manner and just support him, and certainly he deserves kudos for the pillar that he is in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Great job.
Very good. CPAC, we can proceed with me doing the vote for the co-chair, or I can relinquish my seat and turn it over to your newly elected chair. Your pleasure.
I would continue. I would recommend you continue in for the co-chair.
Okay, now nominations for your co-chair are Autumn Blackledge and Jonathan Green. We'll do first votes for Autumn Blackledge. Those in favor for Autumn being your co-chair, please show by raising your hand. Thank you. Those in favor of Jonathan Green being your co-chair, please do so by a show of hands. By show of hands, a vote for for Autumn was 3. Vote for Jonathan Green was 6. Who was the 7th? Oh, did Marshall vote? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand, Marshall. 7.
Oh,
Now I see it.
that's what we were missing before. We didn't get your hand.
Yeah, it was on the side of the screen. Okay, all right, so by your show of hands, Autumn vote count is 3. Vote count for Jonathan Green is 7. Majority of votes goes to Jonathan Green as your co-chair.
Thank you.
And at this point, I will turn the gavel to navigate through the agenda to your newly elected chair of the CPAC, Dr. Martin.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Powell. The agenda, if I'm not mistaken, is right there before you. But prior to heading into it, I would like to ask, is there any expectations from the city as far as your desire on how us to proceed with our meetings? I think that for me to have a good understanding of that so that I could properly navigate and lead would be appropriate.
Lauren?
Could that first take place?
Yeah. What I can do, Dr. Marshall, because really the agenda is pretty simplistic tonight and we formulated, I can navigate this meeting through the agenda for tonight if that's okay with you, sir.
But I think you were asking what's gonna happen. How does the city expect you to be able to get information from people?
Well, is there any expectation as far as the conducting of it? And I think a lot of that can be answered by way of having an initial meeting. I just want to make certain that I'm adhering to what is desired of me.
We are looking, we've had this question, I know Charles had written this, trying to figure out to be able to be more remote and give y'all opportunities through Zoom or whatever to have meetings with people outside. So as you're getting fact finding and doing that, we certainly are looking at those potentials. So the city is looking for resources in a COVID environment to figure out how we can allow you to gather more information and meet with the public and find out that. But we're obviously very sensitive to COVID, and as long as we stay in the environment we currently are in, we probably will have to do things remotely. But obviously, if things change and our numbers go dramatically down and the virus dissipates, we may be able to get back to some type of town halls. But otherwise, we're going to have to do most of this remotely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Did that answer your question? Did that answer
Yes,
your
sir.
question? Okay. We're moving through the agenda. The next agenda item on is one, acknowledgement of what was put in front of you today, which should have been a copy of the city's charter. And I know you just got that today. Some of you may have been familiar with it before then now. But what I'd like to do is just kind of open it up if there's any immediate concerns, comments, or questions you might have related to that document.
And this is just in regards to the charter?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Was not intended for you to have to do a review now and formulate questions. So if there's none, you know, at the beginning of this, that's fine. And you can have that document take with you. So at your next meeting, if there's some specific concerns and questions you have, we can address them then. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
The next item is the PPD, Pensacola Police Department Policies and Procedures. What has been put in place for you all is to access those documents via electronic, via your city email that was established for you through that account mechanism. Has anyone had the chance to do that? And is that working okay?
Yeah, I did today.
Okay. Anyone having difficulty?
Only 671 pages.
Yeah.
I know. That's why we didn't print it out.
I've had some email difficulties.
Email difficulties?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you shared that with Kimmy?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Powell, I had a quick question on that regarding all those plethora of documents, and Chief Leiter staff may know more. Is that a publicly, digestible document? For instance, if folks were to ask me as a representative of this board to see a certain document such as use of force, can they see that? I would assume the answer is yes. Hey, Chief Leiter.
Yes, it is public record. Okay. I can share it. And then just to let everybody know, they are living, breathing documents. We're in the middle of an accreditation cycle, so we tweak them. We're reviewing every single one of them. So if there's a change, we discussed it as we make changes to them. We'll let you know, hey, this policy's been updated. Most of them are minor. Occasionally, there's some significant changes. If the state law changes or an accreditation requirement changes or just best practices change. So we get recommendations in from the advisory committee here, we may change them. So I just want to let you know if that's happening. It happens often, and as we make changes, we'll make sure that we let you know so that you have, if you print something out, I want to make sure that you have the most recent copy.
Thank you.
So in the case, Chief, just for the group's benefit, so the changes will be made real time to the document. As those changes are made, will it update the document that they have reviewed?
We'll ensure that they're updated, yes. Because we're going to, it's, one of the recommendations from Dr. Alexander with the advisory committee was to put them on our website and make them publicly available. They've never been publicly available before, so as a result of this advisory committee, the recommendation is that we put them on our website and make them publicly available. So if they're on there, they're public records. Some of our internal, like a SWAT team makeup or our tactics, that's heavily redacted, as you can imagine. So that's not on there. So if it's on the website, it's public record, they have access to it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So the command staff, we have an accreditation manager, he's a lieutenant in training. And if it's an accreditation change or a recommendation, an officer can write a letter and says, hey, I think we can do this better, whatever it is, whatever it is. They'll write a letter to the chief up, and then we'll pull the policy for review, and then all of the command staff will review it. And everything's electronic, so it'll be reviewed through the command staff. Subject matter experts, if it's a DUI, of course, we'll engage our DUI officers. K-9 handler would be the OIC over the K-9 unit. SWAT team would be the SWAT commander. So subject matter experts, our legal, Vanessa Moore, and then the command staff. All of us will review it. I'm the last one. I'll say, okay, this is good to go, and then we'll publish it. Great. Thank you.
About how long does that process take?
It depends on the policy and the change. It could take, could take 2 days. If I say, hey, we're going to make this change, it happens pretty quick. I can just say, hey, this is something that we want to do. If it's an officer, or depending on what the change is, it could take several weeks or months. And we could send it to a committee, and we may not even make the change. So it really depends on the change.
Let me ask everyone to pull your mic close to you when you speak, so our virtual audience can hear you.
Yes, it is.
And make sure your green light is on.
Good?
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Okay, any further questions on, as it relates to the policies and procedures and access and view of those?
I got a question due to access. Is it possible for us to get access to like the different like crime charts of different demographic areas within the city and like the number of maybe unsolved homicides in the city? I mean, 'cause that's the problem we have to fix.
Yeah, take a seat up.
So can you repeat the question specific?
Is there any way like we could get stats of like the different demographic areas, like just the different neighborhoods of like crime, like the crime rates and what's going on in these different neighborhoods, and like the unsolved murder rate?
Yes, sir. All of that's public record. My recommendation would be to send any of those requests through, do you want them through you or?
Send those requests to Kimmy, and then we'll archive them for one and get them to Tommy's side of the house.
All right.
I've been through some committees before. Sometimes if one person does a public records request, you want them sent out to everybody so you kind of get a feel for what you're asking. Otherwise, it'll slow it down. And if something we want to discuss, certainly if it's in depth, that kind of stuff, it'd be nice if we could get it onto an agenda. I'm looking at you, Doc. Get it on an agenda so that I can pull the policies, pull the information that we need. Everybody gets it. So when we walk in here, we can have real good conversations about whatever topic it is.
I had a question as well. Is there any way for the statistics on the diversity within the ranks as far as how many officers, the diversity there, and then as it goes up, sergeant, lieutenant, your field training officers, that kind of thing?
Yes, it's the same thing if you just send a public records request. That'll come from City Hall. I would recommend adding, if we can track the number of applicants, you know, how many are applying based on race and gender, how many people are making it through actual getting hired. Those are some good questions that we can have.
Okay.
Great conversations.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Chief, I'd just like to thank you for coming. I think it's important to have a representative of the police department here at our meetings. It's an important voice, certainly part of the process. Do you, and I would also love it if we could have a representative of the state attorney's office here. I know we're in a transition in that office, and I don't know who the right person to reach out to, either the current administration or the new administration, but they certainly have a role, I think, in all this, and I'd love to be able to have their input if available and if they're willing.
Yeah, what I envision is certainly if it's something makes it to an agenda, whatever, next month, we're going to discuss juvenile civil citation. That's a hot topic. We're going to have to engage my recommendations that we would engage, say, the state attorney's office, because they play a big part of that. And then request that they show up. You know, we'll have a new state attorney, Ginger Madden. So I know she's an advocate of diversionary programs, as I am. So I think there's some opportunities there, certainly. But my recommendation would be to send that request, whatever, hey, we're discussing this topic next month, and then send a request to the mayor, and then somebody will reach out and invite them as a courtesy to show up. And I didn't have a canned speech. I wasn't sure if I was going to speak in tonight, so if I just take a moment, I appreciate everybody in this room, everybody here, all of us on this side of the table and that side of the table. We want nothing but to be better. We want to have the best police department in the state. I think that as we look through our policies, look at what we're doing, I think you're going to find that we do a great job. I've had an opportunity I know most of you. I know if I have not met you, I know of you, just with the nature, you know, I've been policing for 30 years, so I'm looking forward to an opportunity to work together. This is not adversarial. I am excited about the opportunity to really, you know, let's look at, we're your police department. I say that all the time. So you tell me what it is that you want us to do. Keep in mind, we have state laws, accreditation requirements, and all we can do is be better for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, and I appreciate the discussion, because I think these are, in any discussions we have, probably would be holistic to the system. Unfortunately, all we can control is the city's portion. I don't control the state attorney office, and I can't make him or make her, who's, you know, when she takes over, do anything here necessarily. But again, we certainly would be happy to ask, and if they come forward, we'd love to work with them and partner. We agree, but we can only control the city.
Would it be okay if I reached out to Ginger?
That's fine.
Any further requests? Just by way of thought, I think most of the requests that have been asked tonight are definitely foundational information that would help you guide and help direct you in where it is we want to go as a committee. But I think as we get down the road, we also have got to figure out what that focus is. And some of the requests may have to take more of a formal agreement upon by the body, that this is something we want to do, this is something we need to review based on the direction that you want to go. But most definitely, I think everything that was requested tonight is foundational kind of information. But going forward, the chair, of course, will have to navigate as it relates to what it is we do want to request as a body. So we're moving kind of in a team direction and not individual direction, if that makes sense. All right, what I'm gonna do at this time is turn it over to our facilitator. I know he asked you guys to give some thought at last meeting to what you thought some of the 2 to 3 areas of concerns within your various districts might be. You may not have had a chance to actually formulate those yet, but at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to him and allow him to do what he does. Dr. Alexander?
Before we go on, Mr. Chair, Mr. Powell, did we get to scheduling the meetings?
Yes.
Just head on scheduling the meetings. Did we discuss
Okay,
that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can, Drew. We have two options, as far as room availability and staff availability from a technical side, and that is the first or the fourth Tuesday or Wednesday of each month. And what we would like to do is for you to decide which one of those dates you would like to be your standard monthly meeting time, either the first or the fourth
Is this still
Tuesday or Wednesday.
Is this still open for multiple meetings, more than one?
That's what I was going to ask as well. The last meeting, we had discussed briefly the potential of 2 meetings a month. And sorry if I'm interrupted you, Kyle, but I looked up some other municipalities. It's relatively common, just with the nature of, this does seem like it'll be a semi-permanent or permanent committee. But especially with the fluid committees, twice a month has been relatively common. City of Denver, Jacksonville. I'm open to it personally, but I would like to hear everyone else's thoughts as well.
Yeah, when it was proposed in the last meeting, I definitely think that it would be, especially with the fervor that I think all of us have to try to iron out some things and get recommendations in, that we should be having at least 2 meetings a month. I say at least, but at most 2 meetings a month. I'm sorry, I'm busy.
I agree with 2 meetings as well.
Is anyone not amicable to that, Mr. Chair?
Certainly, I concur. That was the general consensus of our last meeting, and it was passionately voiced and expressed. And I think if that's something that we can make happen, we need to do just that.
So putting up for a vote?
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Chair, what is the city's limitations? Obviously, we don't want redundant.
Well, what we might have to do, committee, is I'll go back to the facility manager, room manager, calendar manager, Ms. Elaine, and see if, because I would imagine you would not want to do back-to-back, and you probably want to space them out like every 2 weeks, for example. So let me take that back to her. If we can go ahead on and agree that your next meeting possibly will be the fourth Tuesday or Wednesday, or if you'd like to try to accelerate that and get back in 2 weeks, let me work that for you and see if I can come up with some date options.
Lawrence, if I could make one suggestion. Council meets the second and fourth week. So that's a very, those are difficult weeks for us. I wasn't aware, when you said the fourth week, I was like, man, I'm surprised that ends up with council. I think if y'all were able to meet the first and the third week of the month, it would be easier for us to absorb. I don't know what's creating the problem on the third week of the month, but we do have council meetings on second and fourth weeks of the month. So if I think twice is good. I just don't know I don't know what the deal is, but if it could be first and third of the month, that would be better for us because council meets second and fourth.
Yeah, Mayor, I think part of the conflict was code enforcement and planning board meeting. And I think we can work through this though.
Okay.
If I go back to Elaine and let her know, and just see if we can get a little more creative with it. Okay, so I'll take that as action to make that coordination and see if we can come back in 2 weeks for your next meeting and get that to you in a timely fashion. And if we can, that'll make it the second week of the month, and then we'll continue to hang on to the fourth as your second meeting day in the month. If that's okay, Chair.
For confirmation, what date are you proposing, Mr. Powell?
Well, I'm proposing to see if we can work 2 weeks from now. Not sure exactly what that date's gonna be.
The 18th of August?
Roughly around, so yes, sir.
I think y'all need to decide Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we can figure out what works.
Right.
I have a question. Is there any possibility that we could maybe front load a few meetings in a row so that we could, you know, we don't know each other very well. And so, if at all. And so it might be nice to have, you know, a couple stacked so that we can hit some things, so that we can have some goals. And then have a regular meeting scheduled. You know, we may need it every 2 weeks, we may need it once a month, but if we had some momentum, it just feels very disjointed, you know, so that just a suggestion that maybe we'll talk about, you know, the possibility of us having a couple of workshops or something, so that we could get, you know, going somewhere.
Well, obviously, the staff don't want to dictate your time. I mean, if you guys feel as though you need to front load a weekly meeting for the next 30, 60 days, you know, that's your prerogative to do so. But you need to have that discussion amongst yourself and make that decision, and then we'll take it and run with it as far as getting you the meeting room and the space to do that.
With respect to timing, are we just gonna kind of leave this open-ended, like the council meeting does, however long they take and run? So we're not at a set time? I mean, we really don't know what the public involvement is gonna be or what we're gonna be involved in at this point yet. I was almost gonna suggest we wait till after, to discuss this after we went through our objectives. That would give us a pretty broader picture of what we're gonna need going forward, especially with respect to stacking meetings, but it's just a suggestion. And then the other question was, are we gonna just kind of leave it open-ended? We could get a lot of public that will take up a lot of time, and you know, if we limit these things for an hour and a half, or 2 hours, we could be really shutting ourselves down.
So can I make a quick suggestion? This is going to be a logistical challenge, it sounds like, right? So probably even before we begin to talk about anything on the agenda itself, kind of to your point, Autumn, is maybe you guys figure out, you know what, maybe for the next couple of weeks, of course, it all has to be public, right? Whether you do it Zoom, you're doing it publicly in person, it's got to be public. But really just take the next couple of weeks, just figure out logistically how you want to work and when you want to work. Because we're not going to figure that out this evening. Because I think it's things the city got to determine logistically what their capabilities are. And maybe you guys can come up with some ideas as to how you want to do that, offering some of these ideas with the time that we have right now. So it's probably no need into going into what Lawrence was talking about in terms of what are some of the things your folks are telling you in the community. I think we need to know when we're meeting and have some consistency, if you will, so that then we can really get to work on things, right? Because it just feels kind of loose right now, and that's understandable. It's just all of the startup process. So I offer that as a suggestion. Of course, it's left up to you guys, but you may want to just take the time. Okay, logistically, what are our options? When can we meet again? Whether it may be an opportunity, maybe for, even though it's got to be open up, and I don't know the logistics, the legal side of it, but maybe do next week. It may be a Zoom meeting, as long as it's public, right? But to kind of work through some of the logistics, because if we wait 2 weeks to come back and have this same conversation, a lot's going to get lost. And it certainly will in a month. So I just offer that maybe this needs to just be about, because we're giving birth to this, right? We really are. And some of it's going to be figuring it out as you go along. And some of it also going to be conceding to ideas that may not have been yours, but for the best interest of the group. How do we move forward? So I would suggest you take the time that you have left in this meeting and maybe just talk about some of the logistics, how you want to move forward. And then there's some options that can be offered. And then you can decide on those, and that'll probably take up the rest of this meeting. But at least we'll know where we're going in the next 2, 3, 4 meetings, as someone had mentioned. If that makes sense to you. I just offer that as a suggestion. And certainly it's left up to you all and logistically to the city as to how you want to approach that.
Well, it sounds like we pretty much got it buttoned up. It's the 1st and the 3rd. We just gotta figure out what days. And then if it's open-ended until we get through to, based on what the public may be involved in, we're done. If we come here in 2 weeks and we're still figuring things out on where we are, it's just a short meeting. If we get involved in things, it's a longer meeting. Well, we know the 4th week is out.
Well, the first basic question is, do you want to meet weekly or bi-weekly?
I think the suggestion was, Mr. Chair.
Monthly?
Up to twice a month would
Twice?
be, I said up to, I think that's a key word. We may not always have to meet twice a month, but I would say up to twice a month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really think that we should possibly try to meet on the 18th of August and then start our 1st and 3rd from there.
I second that.
Okay.
And then if those meetings were to go a little longer, if needed, would everybody be okay with that? I mean, as far as the city goes, as far as using the facilities and that sort of thing?
I think going longer into the night, there's no problem with that.
You guys are used to it.
Normally, it's just the start times,
I mean, I
of
know we're not
course.
city council or anything, but, you know.
No, right. The only consideration I have to do and coordinate with, is, of course, is our tech support side of the house, for as long as we're doing the combination of Zoom and.
I do think relative to having seen council meetings that have gone really long, if you can keep it to 90 minutes to 2 hours, I think that's a good time. Charles has been on a few councils that the meetings go long, and once you get past 3 hours, it just starts wearing on people. So I think I'm not saying you need to have a hard time, but I think you might want to have some things and think, hey, between 90 and 120 minutes, that's where we need to be, somewhere that's the sweet spot.
One of the things I noticed on the email went out, and I didn't see it go out to the public, but I noticed that the open forum suggestion was open until 5:30 today. So number one, did we get any public participation? And number two, should we be shutting that down prior to 5:30 so that we kind of know how long to schedule any public communication and what we're going to face during that meeting? Did I see that? Did I see that correctly? Okay, okay,
So the public forum did close at 3 p.m. as far as them being able to sign up.
okay. Will we get that information prior to the meeting?
We can
How much
provide that information.
involvement is going to be, how many people are going to register and be called so that we kind of know?
Absolutely, I'll have that information and I can send that to you.
Yeah, I
prior
mean,
to the
you know,
meeting.
depending on what that is, you may have to set void form limits, right? I mean, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is, but,
Yes,
Right.
and we were gonna leave that up to the chair and co-chair to decide the amount of time that each
Okay.
Person calling in would have.
okay. Good typo, I was a little confused with that.
Right. And we only had one call in today, and then he rescinded his call, and wanted to wait until next week, or your next meeting, rather. So what I've heard is, we would like to schedule out your next meeting on August 18th, 5:30. And then following that, meeting on the 1st and the 3rd of the month.
I'll do just,
First and third Tuesday of the month.
just want to make note the 18th is primary election day as well.
You're very
Just-
astute there, Jonathan, thank you. Shame on all of us.
Just,
But not sure how much of an impact that'll be. I mean, what time the poll close?
Should
You
be
guys just
7.
need to make sure you do all your voting before you come in here. Okay, so November 18th, 5:30. August 18th. I'm trying to get the election over, man. August 18th, 5:30. And then on the 1st and 3rd, Tuesday, at 5:30. Okay? Anything else as it relates to meeting, next meeting and, following meeting, date and times. Okay, very good. As far as meetings is, you ready?
So one thing I'd ask everyone, if you had an opportunity to, I don't know if you did, but to be able to communicate with people in your respective districts or areas where you have responsibility, to get some feedback from them in terms of what are some of the issues around public safety that they were concerned about. I was hoping we would have an easel, maybe that board, if someone wanted to take notes, because if you do, you know, we can begin to share and talk about some of those things and look for some common themes. And the other question I had, did any of you have an opportunity to take a look at the task force report?
Mm-hmm.
Did you?
Yes, sir.
And if you have any questions around that, certainly I'll try to answer them as much as I can. But in the time that we have, about 40 minutes, maybe it would be great to go around and hear from anyone on the committee that has talked to people who have some concerns. What are they? And maybe we can document some of them, look for common themes, if you will. And if we can find those common themes, that may be, Mr. Chairman, something which you all can begin to tackle one at a time and address along with whatever else may come along, right? It's just kind of a kickoff point, if you will. And if you have not done that, and that's okay, we still got next week. But my sense is some of you probably do have some feedback. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the chairman, but I think that'd be a great place to start tonight to kind of get us kick-started a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, I simply wanted to say, I know Charles has brought this up to us. I know many of you have had a problem because we are working, Trudy, and I see Chris over there, to get it where you can electronically get information, because I know right now in COVID, it's tough to meet with people and get information. So the city is working on that. I know we're efforting to be able to get you Zoom meetings. I know Charles has specifically asked us about that, and we've been working on it. So if you haven't had the chance to do that, we are going to work to make that available to you. We're working our people through it as well. So we do understand, and we do want you to have that opportunity to connect via Zoom or other technological virtual ways.
I've spoken to some community members, and in answering your question, one concern that I've come across was being able to file complaints on officers because of the mistrust as far as if that can be done electronically. I don't think that's a method that is provided. You have to normally go down to the headquarters and file with the desk sergeant. And if that is something that can be moved to an online system as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd echo.
No, we're not going to get any responses from anyone. I just want us to be able to lay these out, and maybe someone keep record of them, and put them on the board. We're just going to write them out. We're not going to respond to them tonight, but we are looking for common themes, if you will, right? So.
And I'd echo that, Mr. Chair, and especially since Chief Leiter's here, maybe we can get some questions out of the way for him. On the complaint process, I did notice it. I tried to look on the website. From my knowledge, and I guess Jonathan's, there's no way to do it. Is that, and I know you're not supposed to respond, but just to make sure that that's true, right? Because I don't want to spread false information.
You can file a complaint anyway. We'll take electronic complaints. We get them through emails, and we'll address them that way.
But is there a portal? Okay.
Jonathan, put in parentheses portal, please.
I've done a few knocking on the doors myself due to the simple fact that I do this regarding my own project as well. So a few things that were common that I heard from a few elderly people and younger people from more so the lower income and high crime rate areas. When it comes to policing, a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents, aunties and stuff were basically on saying that police officers in those communities only come to enforce and not police. They never see officers doing nothing but enforcing, either pulling someone over or stopping and saying, hey, what are you doing out here, this, that, and the third, but they never get anyone to just come up and see what's going on. They might see a young black man or anybody walking down the street looking a certain way, and that goes for a stereotype instead of pulling over and figuring out, just trying to get to meet somebody. Or even elderly people, they say they sit on their porches all day and no one ever stops by just to say, hey, what's going on? Because if we're going to solve crimes or anything in these areas, the elderly people in these areas are the people that know everybody. They know everybody. They want to probably 9 out of 10 times tell what's going on in these areas, but there's no trust, there's no rapport there. So that 9 out of 10 times leads to a high number of unsolved murders because no one wants to talk to you. Another thing when it comes to just the areas, the high crime areas, and it did raise some suspicion in my eyes, because if we have high crime areas where a lot of killings, a lot of drugs are being sold, why are there more neighborhoods in upper class neighborhoods with security cameras and everything else, but not in the areas where the crime is going down? I guarantee you 9 out of 10 times people would not pull the trigger if they know it's a camera above them watching them, if it's one on each apartment or each project building. So that's another thing I got from people in the areas. And then I talked to Lawrence Powell a little bit. I talked to you, Mr. Powell, a little bit about it, but just cleaning.
1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot somebody was writing.
Access to technology, okay, or to camera technology. I'm sorry.
Oh, you all right. I forgot somebody was writing. And then another thing was just cleaning up the areas to make them look better and give kids something to do out the neighborhoods besides walk around and run around. We're going through COVID where kids aren't in school right now. It's been the summertime, but school, they supposed to start next week and they're not starting to the end of the month. So they still got an extra 2 to 3 weeks just to do nothing but find things to do. So it's clean up some of the areas and put resources there, parks, a basketball court, a baseball court, something there for kids to do during the weeks or during the weekends while they're not doing nothing.
What would you call that, so you can get to?
Would that be resources, parks and recreations, something? I literally just wrote their words verbatim, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You have any other conversations around the table? Please, anybody jump in.
Oh, okay. So one thing that came up, when I was talking to some community members was about a grading system for law enforcement. I don't know if there's one already in place that we maybe just don't know about, specifically as citizens. But, yeah, that's one thing they wanted to know, like, what is this officer's grade, as far as how they interact with citizens? And then also a arrestable offenses type of grading system too. So it's 2-tiered.
Is that arrestable?
Yeah, like,
Could you put your mic a little closer? Sorry.
I'll
Just so everyone's
adjust my
watching.
face real quick. Okay, so when I say this, I mean as in like a system where, you know, let's say you either have to pull somebody over and arrest them for a marijuana charge versus getting somebody for a deadly assault. Well, on your grading system, deadly assault's going to be higher, so you arrest that person instead of picking up more and more people with small petty marijuana charges, for instance. So if that's like, yeah, a database is that with a system in place.
Is that like decriminalization?
Kind of,
Is
yeah.
that the theme of that? Yeah.
Yep. There was a question about access to records already that I wrote down. There was also a concern around some community conferencing with law enforcement, the ones that specifically work within their neighborhoods.
What would that look like?
A town hall or?
It could be kind of, well, I mean, it was just I want to know who it is that's in my neighborhood, get to know this person, be able to tell them the struggles specifically. And we would see that on the ends of the officers that actually work probably to be in that area, versus the actual citizens that live in that area too, so that they can have recognition with each other. And I think this is something that's come up a few times when I've talked to people. And just a quick question. Is implicit bias training on like a rotating type of schedule? Like, do they go through it again? I feel like I asked them this one time, but I couldn't remember. If they do it once and then that's it, or?
Yeah, but I'm going to be meeting with them again sometime
Okay.
later. Yeah, but they did go through the training. And I just put the training up virtually also.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
What I've heard as well from speaking with those within the community is the police focusing more on temperance rather than tacticalness. It's as though once they come into the neighborhoods, they are more concerned, or rather, there's this presence of being more tactical rather than, I think Brother Kyle mentioned it, more or less interacting and providing some kind of respect or some kind of interaction with the community. Secondly, someone else has already made mention of it as well, and that was sustainable dialogue, that there is never any kind of, whether it be formal or informal, where there is dialogue with the community that they live in. For instance, if there was a rapport that was built with the police officers, rather than looking at them as Rambo, but rather more like figuratively Romeo, if you will. We know that there are crimes there, but that was the consensus that I got from a lot of folk, that there's just not that feeling of genuine care based on what is on the actual police car, of, you know, being courteous and that sort of thing. So that was my feedback that I received.
I got, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would put it, what I've heard in my discussions with people was demilitarization of the police, which I take more as what I've read in the report, Dr. Alexander's report, was kind of shifting to a guardian mindset rather than a warrior mindset, which I think is reminiscent of your Rambo Romeo comment, so I'd kind of put an asterisk by that one. Another thing that I heard was the decriminalization of minor offenses, things like possession of paraphernalia, driving while license suspended, small amounts of marijuana. So I would also put an asterisk next to what Haley had said, is something that I think deserves further study. Some concerns with juvenile diversionary programs, I think the chief mentioned earlier, and a lot of concern about police pay and benefits, to make sure that we were in a position as a city to hire and retain good police officers, that we had the right compensation and benefits packages so that we could recruit, retain, and train the best police officers that we could.
I also wanted to add, I have had concerns as far as citizens with speaking about local officers. And what that means is we're having police officers who are from the community, who live in the city residence, will live in the city limits, rather, who police. They're not living out in Santa Rosa County to come back, because essentially you expend the gas that they take their cruisers home. A lot of tax dollars that are in our community go to other communities because they don't live in the community in which they police. So, and then that goes into a point that was in the task force. Can the policy be changed where the local policing where that can be implemented, where you can. Yes, sir. I would just want to speak it in the microphone.
But you did record it, okay.
Yeah.
Can we make this, Mr. Chair, like a kind of a two-way or all-way conversation too? Like, can I back off of his comments? I think that's okay. So I agree. I've seen in other cities where there may not necessarily be a mandatory requirement for officers or city employees to live in the city limits, but maybe there's an incentive. So maybe we could provide housing that the city owns, or possibly increased pay. And I know that's not really a directive of this committee, but it certainly could be, because the main goal is to get good officers. So I would just double down on that statement.
All right, if I may, Mr. Chair, a couple of things have already been mentioned. I'd like to continue them. Attrition is going to be one of the main issues that I'm going to be addressing. I've actually been studying it for several years. I have a lot of data on it. I'd like to be able to schedule a time to do a PowerPoint, probably take a good 15, 20 minutes. I've got several years of data on it. Attrition, minimum starting pay for the officers, FRS pension plans, a step plan. I think that if you did what we did, which was read this 21st century policing, you'll find that, and it's up here, and we've had several discussions today already, community-oriented policing. The word community is offered about 400 times in this booklet. It's actually one of the pillars. And attrition is probably a pretty substantial, it's a large issue. It's been a large issue in Pensacola, within the Pensacola Police Department for several years, starting from a couple of administrations ago that closed the transferable pension plan and went to FRS, stopped doing pay raises. During the downturn in 2008, attrition went skyrocketing. Look, during the downtime is not the time to defund a police force, right? That's when crime rises. In any event, attrition has been a large issue, so I would like to be able to present data to this board and go through that and discuss that. The second offering that I was going to suggest was for this board to maybe be involved in the Citizen Police Academy. I think it could bring a lot of camaraderie. It was pretty extensive. I'm not sure how we're going to do that right now during COVID, but I know that it was 7 or 8 weeks, once a week, 5 hours a night, and it went through extensively what the police department went through. I learned a lot from it, and I think it would be great for us to understand that knowledge. The third thing that I was going to suggest was bringing in Connie Bookman. Connie Bookman was on the mayoral transition team. She was a pillar. She was a licensed clinical social worker. She's the founder of Pathways for Change, and she did an extensive study during that transition team on the police. Did a lot of ride-alongs, did a lot of interviews, did a lot of documentation. It may be really good to bring her in and just give her pitch and discuss what she went through, because she's got a lot of knowledge. The other thing that I did, and I'll take off from what we've already discussed, was taking home of vehicles, and I agree. Finding some perks, I'd like to know how many of the officers actually live outside of the city, and finding out if we can establish benefits for them staying in the city, especially when they take home cars. I think that's very beneficial, and I think from talking to council people years ago, we used to offer that, so I'm not sure where we are, but I think it would be good to bring that in and study it. And the other thing that I had was I would like to find out, I gave Lawrence a request was to find out what our officers are and how long they've been on the staff now. You'll see the data that I'll show you, but in the last, we've got about 165 officers right now. In the last 5 years, we've lost almost 100 of them. So our attrition has gone through the roof. And I'd like to find out how young our officers are. When we talk about demilitarizing, when we talk about community-based, when we talk about going into these neighborhoods and knowing who people are, you can't do that unless you keep these guys on the street. And when you have a retirement system that's transferable like FRS, and you're flipping these recruits because more other departments are paying them, you're not going to get that camaraderie. You're not going to get that community level. These officers out there now, I guarantee you, they don't know who Cowboy is, okay? You've got to sustain this police force to get some of the things that we're asking for and make this community-based. So those are the things I'd like to address.
Did you get all that, Jonathan? I guess I got a few things as well, kind of redundant. On the quote-unquote demilitarization tactics or policies, I wanted to see if we could request staff and the department to get I'm not sure how it's tracked, but transfers from the DOD to the department. I know they exist, whether it's weapons or vehicles, so possibly have a report on that within the coming weeks or months.
What are you referring to for?
There's a
Correct. So,
That's coming from the military.
right, I forget what the form's called. Chief Lauder might know, but it's not really important. But just to see what equipment we've received from the DOD within the past, that's still in inventory. I would like to reiterate to review minority hiring practices, recruitment, and retention. If we can get a report of the demographic makeup of the department. I tried to look for it. I don't think it exists, but I'm sure it's in the back of your heads. But I'd like to get a report on that as well. And again, just the complaint process, I would like to see a very, kind of like 311, it could even be implemented into that, a streamlined complaint process. So, they don't have to call. If they want to be anonymous, they could be. I'm not sure how that works, but I think that would be beneficial, and many other cities do that as well. One thing I wanted to touch on was I've had a number of reports from citizens just regarding the supposed criminalization of citizens that are experiencing homelessness. These are mostly people that rely on the public domain and public space. So I wanted to also ask for a report. Staff's going to hate me for this, but just itemizing PPD's response to issues that are related to homelessness and the amount of resources spent on it, time mostly, and the amount of citations or arrests regarding citizens experiencing homelessness. And maybe one other one is regarding mental health issues. There's been widespread recognition that police officers are kind of routinely called on circumstances and issues that they might not be best qualified for just due to their training. So I wanted to see how many calls are made annually related to mental health issues. How many officers are trained to deal with that? And if we don't have a social worker or mental health unit within department, and I don't believe we have that unit within the department, maybe this committee can look at establishing a mental health unit for the Pensacola Police Department. That's about all I have just for now. So just some thoughts to ponder.
Mr. Chair, I would like to just say amongst the majority of the things that's already been stated, but civil citation was one of the things that came up in my conversations and the lack of the use of them. And there were people who were being minors mainly who were being arrested for misdemeanors. And so we would like to look at that policy to see what we can do to better use civil citations for the future. Recruiting was another thing. The recruiting, how do we go about recruiting African Americans to become a part of the Pensacola Police Department. One of the things I think I mentioned when I met with the mayor a while back was that you have Pensacola police officers in some of the schools, and of course they're there as I guess, I don't know, truancy, or I forget what you call them, the officers in the school. But anyway, maybe they can also teach a class in those schools that will help them become more familiar with the students, and so that they would, the students will have an opportunity to interact with police officers. That may be something that we would probably want to look at for future, not just be there for law enforcement, but be there also to interact with the children, so that there will be a better rapport and students will not be afraid of police officers. Also, one of the things that in my discussions we talked about the education. What is the educational requirements for to become a police officer? And so, and maybe that could be an issue, but that's something I think we should look at to make sure that we're recruiting the type of people that should be in law enforcement. And that's pretty much all that I had to share this evening. But a lot of the things, I do agree with some of the other ideas that were put on the table this evening.
Just to follow up with what he said about education, is there any kind of anything that we can look at to see what, like how often officers are trained on policies and procedures and actual like laws? Because I can say as a witness, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people, other people can say as well, it's too many times where you're pulled over by an officer and they pull you over something. You say, hey, where can you show me that? Or can you tell me what law that is? And they say, I don't know it, or they got to look it up or anything like that. And I feel like to be a police officer and pull someone over, you should know off top verbatim on why you're pulling them over, opposed to having to go and look it up or arrest me and then look it up once you get to the station.
Did y'all want to write that down, Mr. Green? I don't know how you would put it in short sentences.
Kind of like continuing education. What are the continuing education protocols for the department?
Basically, like, do you learn your laws all the time? I mean, I know different ordinances change, different laws either change or get taken away. Do officers go through different trainings to be updated on these things?
Yeah, I think we get the gist of what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Anybody else?
You know, I think that people want to be safe. Okay, so, I mean, ultimately, we have police so that we're safe. And that's what I hear from feedback, is that, you know, there's concerns about defunding, there's concerns about the way that we're policing, but really, ultimately, you know, it shouldn't always be a panic attack when you see blue lights, because, you know, my husband's a firefighter, and, you know, they get cats out of trees, and they do all these things, and they have Santa Claus on the back of a fire truck, and they do all these things that help build rapport with the community. But the fact of the matter is, our police department doesn't have all the resources it needs, whether it be social, mental health units, whether it be training, whatever it might be. They don't have time to throw candy off the back of a police car, you know, in a community. And we need to figure out what we can use with our resources that we have, and what additional resources does the department need, and where to direct those resources so that we can build trust in those communities, so that people do feel safe, and that there's a trust level that you can call a police officer and they're going to keep you safe and it not be scary. That, you know, no matter how, you know, what's going on, that if there's a crime, that you can feel comfortable calling 911 and getting a cop to come and take care of the situation. So that's what I hear from, people who are asking me about this committee, is that they're just like, we just want to be safe. Everybody wants to be safe.
Can y'all hear me okay? I took a little bit of a different tack because I didn't have the opportunity to go out and meet with my neighbors. But I do have some ties to Pensacola State College, and I actually met with their diversity committee today. They've just formed kind of a diversity think tank there at the college. And to kind of use the education segue, some of the things that they're talking about is educating the students and the faculty at the college about diversity, talking about implicit bias and those sorts of things. But they also want to work with this committee in any way that we can use them. They said that they would make open their facilities if we want to use the WSRE studio for meetings or any of the spaces on campus. Dr. Meadows also asked me to extend a personal invitation to Dr. Alexander. They would love for you to come to the college and talk with them. And he said if you would email them, he will discuss the particulars with you. I did talk with also a friend of mine who's a youth minister at Cokesbury Church, and she is involved with a group here in Pensacola. It's Just, J-U-S-T, Pensacola, and they are an interdenominational group that has just started, and they're going to be doing some community outreach and addressing diversity and those sorts of things as well. So those are two groups that are already in existence here in Pensacola who are interested in working with us and with this committee. The college has offered to provide survey data. They'll be doing a survey in the next couple of weeks. And one of the questions they will be asking on the survey is about interactions with public safety. And so they have offered also to make that data available to us. Sorry, my mask is slipping down a little bit. But I did want to go ahead and pass on that message that the college is interested in supporting, offering continuing education. And so I will be keeping in touch with them to kind of update them on what goes on here at the committee, and if we ever need to bring any of those folks in. Dr. Ramika Leary is the coordinator of diversity studies there at the college, and she's also offered her assistance. And then as we move forward, I am interested in looking into more of the town hall type meetings so that I can involve more of my neighbors in the discussion. Right now, everybody's got so many things going on, so there hasn't been a lot of feedback. I know in Scenic Heights, our rapport with Pensacola Police Department has always been good. In fact, the way I met Chief Leiter was that he was our neighborhood liaison who came to our neighborhood meetings. And, so that's how we met and those relationships were formed. So I do think that we've already got a lot of things in place already that we can use, and I think that some of these ideas we can just kind of enhance and tweak a little bit and have a good experience.
Anybody else? We got about 10 minutes left. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, I've been waiting. So I have lots of thoughts. I'm a prior law enforcement officer on the federal level, so I have lots of things I could respond to, but I'll keep it to the things that I spoke with citizens about over the past week or so. Investigations are a critical thing when an officer does something that, if something goes wrong. I think we need to make sure that investigations are done. Investigations have been done in the past, but it's critical that we do investigations when something goes wrong. And just because deadly force is used does not mean something necessarily went wrong. That was a comment that was made in the past, was that if we use deadly force, that we've done something wrong. That's not always the case. In some cases, deadly force is necessary. One of the concerns I heard from citizens was the use of deadly force when we use firearms. We should give some type of warning to someone before we use deadly force. And I had to clarify with that person well, what if somebody's shooting at you? You shouldn't have to warn them before you shoot back, and they agreed with that. And also shooting at vehicles. This person thought that you could not shoot at vehicles. Well, the fact is, if the vehicle is threatening someone, whether it be the officers or civilians, there's a time to shoot at a vehicle potentially. And they also agree with that. The community policing, which has already been mentioned, I think some of us talk to the same people. Community policing is important. I think face-to-face interaction, getting the police officers out there to meet individuals. When I rode along with the police back in 2010, we went into Addicts Court. I went in with an officer, we walked and talked to people. It's hard to do that in a COVID environment, but getting to know your police officers is critical. The funding issues already been brought up. The local option sales tax is a source of a lot of capital improvements, things for the police department, police cars. We have take-home vehicles. Is that something that we should consider doing away with in the future, that police officers who live outside the city should not have a take-home vehicle? That could be one of the incentives to make them live inside the city. This is one of my council members who appointed me. We discussed this, local option sales tax and the use of that. And also, I would be remiss to say that, in my experience, even when I see blue lights behind me, it freaks me out. I think I actually, my heart stops because I think I'm the one who's done something wrong. In some cases, I've been pulled over for speeding or something, and it was me, but it still concerns me. But it's nothing like what certain segments of our community are experiencing, and that's one of the things that came out clearly, is that in certain segments of our community, in the minority community, there's a distrust and a fear of the police. And the more we can do as a police force to get out there and show that we are out to protect, and I think it's been mentioned already, that we're not out there to enforce always, we're there to be out there to serve and protect. And I also think it's very critical that the school resource officers are out there and they're the right people for that job. I think it's critical that students in those schools interact with officers that are trained to gain trust, to be there to serve and protect, and not always to be the enforcers. There's a time to enforce, there's a time to be a trusted ally. And I think police have to be our trusted allies, and they can't always be the one that is enforcing. And so I'm very excited to be part of this committee. I think there's a lot for us to do. I think the policies and procedures being thrown at us today was a little overwhelming. I think we've got a lot to go through, and the fact that they're constantly changing is going to make it even more difficult for us. But I just appreciate the opportunity to be part of the committee, and I will join you all in person in the future. So it's just easier to talk without a mask on.
All right. Anybody else? We got about 5 minutes left, and I want to turn it back over to the chair before we leave. Anyone else? Yes.
Mandatory trauma-informed training. We're a trauma-informed community. I just think we should take a look at making that a thing.
What is that again?
Trauma-informed training. I know that there's an option right now for some critical intervention training and things of that nature, but I think we should be looking at it being something mandatory for all.
Can you give me a little bit more context? I'm not familiar with the term.
Trauma-informed? Okay, so trauma-informed care is the way that we care for others in the community with us. If we're responding to those that's in a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
If we have trauma-informed training to back us, we know how to step into those situations. Everybody getting first aid, mental health training, things of that nature.
Police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also, my background is in victim services.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this is based off of the way, also how I've seen officers sometimes treat those that are victims.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that they're responding correctly to them, because that's the issue.
All right. I'm quite sure you keep a note of that.
You know.
Okay. So let me say this real quick. As y'all were putting those items up on the board, I can't tell you how many times I just wanted to jump in because I eat this kind of stuff for lunch. And I write about it a lot. I speak about it a lot. And a lot of these things in which you have put up here, quite frankly, I think you're probably going to be surprised some of these things are already being addressed by the police department. And some of these things, and actually virtually all of them you have up there, you're going to be able to find some guide to them in the 21st Century Task Force report. We tackled, if not all, most of these that have been placed up here, from military equipment being utilized in police departments and procedurally what happens there, what policies are written around that utilization of it, when it can be used, so forth and so on. It's just a large number of things. And when you start talking about attrition, I can tell you, having been a chief in 2 major cities in this country, attrition is primarily everybody is struggling with. That is not an anomaly to Pensacola. You can go in industry, you can go into policing, you can go virtually anywhere. Many young millennials are not staying anywhere any more than 2, 3, 4 years. So what we have to begin to think about, if that's the trend, which it is, and the literature will point that out, then is how do we create police officers who are not going to necessarily be 20-year veterans that hang around, but how do we train them and introduce them in communities, even though they may be there for a shorter period of time? Because even if they're not there for a shorter period of time, that is not going to be an excuse to mistreat people. Whether you're there for 2 minutes or whether you're there for 20 years. So y'all have a lot to discuss here. And I hope you made note of these things because, Mr. Chairman, I think this gives you something to begin to work with. Y'all are not going to address all these in one and a half hour session. But I think to be able to go through them in some kind of organized way, Mr. Chairman, and to be able to address them, you have the police department here willing to address these questions with you and what they don't know. I'm quite sure if given adequate time, they'll be able to come back and respond. In regards to the general orders, that you all receive, all 167 pages, the opportunity there, not just for you, but for everybody, is to be able to take a look at them and where you find things in which you have questions about or concerns about. General orders today, and that's even a recommendation in the 21st Century Task Force report, is just not written by police officers itself. There should be community input in those things because what is being written impacts people in the community. So they have a role in some of that as well. So y'all will have an opportunity to address many of these things, but I just ask that you go through them very slowly, very methodically, and try to look at it through the eyes of someone else other than our own. Because if we don't, then what we're doing, we're implementing a bias ourselves. And bias is not relegated just to police officers. If you're born with a brain in your head, we all have biases. And I can get into the science of that anytime you would like to. But it is important, I think, for this group, look at all of those things that you're placed there on the board tonight, and I'm quite sure there'll be many other. But be able to address them one by one, but keeping an open mind to them, being patient to them, looking for resolve and consensus, and working with Chief Leiter and his staff that I know are going to be more than amenable to help address these issues and work to all of us kind of getting on the same page. This can't be us against them. We see this being played out on television every day across this country, and there is no value in that. But what is important is that we all come here having walked in different shoes, having lived in your skin very differently. Some people have to live very differently than others. And I think we have to be sensitive, and we have to stop for a moment and pull ourselves out of the way and our stuff, our biases, and try to look through the lens of somebody else other than just our own. This is going to be a lot of work. It may not feel like it to you, but it will be. But it's going to be great work. It's going to be work that's going to be enlightening. I think it's going to advance this whole idea around reform, which everybody is getting involved in across the country. And Pensacola should be no different. But every community is different, and how much they're able to digest at one time is going to be left up to that community. But I'm going to be here to answer any questions that I can or be of any support to you, but this is your committee, as you heard the mayor say. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back over to you for your, unless you have something else, Lawrence. But other than that, I'm going to turn it back over to you guys, and y'all can adjourn however y'all seem appropriate.
Yes.
But thank you for the night, and thank you for the ideas that you put up on that board, because that's a great start, Mr. Chairman, to begin with this group, to go through each one of those one by one by one by one. And because a lot of questions are going to come off out of those, and a lot more information is going to stream for that, which is going to create other avenues for conversation as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I just want to make one clarifying point, and then I'll yield to the mayor for any comments he might have before the chair take it back. I stated earlier, I think for you guys to discuss amongst yourself as it related to your meeting schedule, but that was clearly intended for in this room and not outside of the room. So I didn't want to, communicate that as it relates to sunshine requirements and restrictions. But Mayor, if you have anything.
Simply to say thank you again for your willingness to serve and do this. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. I think what Mr. Alexander said shows that we are actually doing a lot of these things, but that doesn't mean we can't be doing them better. I think the police chief, Leiter, was very clear that we want to be better. We're trying to, so we appreciate the conversation and keep working forward. And lastly, we're going to work on whatever we need to do to help you be able to communicate better with everyone else. Obviously, in normal times, this is a difficult topic, but we could have done some things normally. It's just made it even worse with the fact that we're in the middle of COVID. But if you can work with us in our technology department, we're going to work to make sure you have the assets you need to be able to communicate with whatever you need to do. We're simply working it through, but it's our hope and our expectation to have something available for you to be able to use. And we understand the challenges you're dealing with. It's just this COVID's made it a little bit challenging for all of us, and we just ask for your patience in working with us and our departments. I know Tree's working hard. We got a lot of people working hard on this, and we thank you for your time, and we want to keep working to make good things happen for the city of Pensacola.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, I just had one final question, I guess for the both of you all. I know, Dr. Alexander, you've been with us for several months. Just for transparency, how long do we have you with the city?
In all honesty, let me figure out how to answer that.
And I apologize.
No. If you feel it's a valuable question, we'll give you a valuable answer.
And the context was all these items that we're looking at.
Yeah.
I don't certainly want to waste anyone's time. So I'd like to know what the department's report card is, so to speak.
The what?
Report card, so to speak. So, for instance, if we are working on one of these items already, among many, where are we at right now? That's kind of what I was getting at. So how long do we have with you as a consultant to work on these issues?
Well, I'm going to be here as long as the mayor asked me to be here, as he's asked you to be here as a committee. But, of course, I'm an independent operator. I can jump on and off, and I doubt it, but certainly I could take off and go anywhere at any time. I get offers for chief of police probably every week in some of the cities you hear a lot about. But that's not where my interest is at this moment. I think my value is one, after a long career, it's great to be back home. I love being back home. I got an 86-year-old mother I'm spending time with who has her own health issues she's contending with. So it's a very critical time for both of us, in our life. And but certainly things can change at any time. But my intention is to be here as long as the mayor intends for me to be here. And because those are, many of the tasks that you all are going to take home as a committee. I've seen this before. I've been through them before. I had to transform 2 police departments in recent years. But I can't tell you how to do this. You have to have your own process. But I tell you, you have a greater head start than many other agencies across the country. Because and I'm not just saying this because they're here, because I'm the only person I'm beholden to is me. But you have a mayor and you have a chief who are committed to advance public safety in this community at a very very critical time in the history of this country. And you're right in the midst of it with everybody else. But I can also tell you from a national platform, you are farther ahead than a whole lot of cities equivalent to your size and those that are larger, that are certainly struggling. So my intent is to be here the whole ride with you, but I can't tell you how to do this because you got to have your own experience in your own city in the context of this country. I can't say what I did here will work here because everywhere, as much as you have similarities, you have differences and everything has to have this process. And that's why I said to you all in my closing remarks is that it becomes important that all of us sitting around these tables recognize the fact that we're going to be in different places around some of this stuff. But the important piece is to try to take off our lenses and look through someone else's so that we achieve the goal that we say we want to achieve. And that'll be demonstrated by the work you do and how you resolve many of these issues. I really wish that if you get an opportunity to listen to my CivicCon speech, some of these issues were addressed in that hour-long interview. And that may be of some value to you when you come back in the next couple of weeks should you have any questions as well too. But if you get a chance to watch that, I go into some of the things that were, some of these things you talked about here tonight. Not in-depthly, but a little more broadly, but I think conceptually you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. So I hope I answered your question.
Very helpful. I know you're very valuable and you could be anywhere else, so I just wanted to kind of touch on that.
I love being home and I love being in this process, and being back home has been great for me on a whole lot of different levels, personally, more personally. So,
thank you.
Are you going to be able to update us on things that you're doing that meld with what we're doing? So in other words, you touched on attrition is a large issue throughout the country.
yeah.
So if you're working on that independently through your consulting, are you going to be able to update us on where we are on that issue and that study?
Well, I'm not working specifically on attrition, but being that I try to read as much as I can about these things, and not just read them, live them. As a chief who saw tremendous turnover in police personnel in 09 and 10. I'm sorry, not 09 and 10, in 13 and 14.
That's when it started here.
Right, in 15, but it is not an anomaly to any business or industry or government. Young people are not going on jobs, staying for long periods of time, and that includes policing. So it's how do we plan around that? Because that's probably not going to train. Now, one thing we do know is that salary, benefits, retirement can play a significant role, but the most important part of people staying on a job, it ain't money, it's feeling valued. That is it in a nutshell, and the literature will point to that. It is feeling valued. Because actually people will stay on the job for less pay than go somewhere for more pay if it's not significant. You understand what I'm saying? If they feel valued, they feel they have a voice, they feel they have input.
I think if we have the opportunity to couple those remedies and solve those issues and reduce that attrition, we will go a long way.
It will, and that'll be part of y'all mission here, is to be able to look at it, address it, and how do you approach it in a way that is going to be, and sometimes that can be a heavy lift for a lot of reasons. But you have an opportunity here to really do some tremendous things inside your city, inside this police department. It's yours, Mr. Chairman, I guess. It's yours, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you so much. Our time has been far spent, and I think that it has been quite beneficial. I just want to say with that, you don't need me to add anything to it. I just want to say two things. Number one, as a reminder, the 18th of August at 5:30 at this present time will be our next meeting, and that formal notation will be sent out in keeping with the Sunshine Law and all of the regulations in which we have to adhere to. And then secondly, I promise you the next time that we do meet, there would be more of a directional structure as to how we can formulate and get on with the business in which all of us are very passionate about. And I've also taken very meticulous notes. I've actually ran out of paper of everyone and with you speaking and what have you. And so I'm going to formulate all of that, and again, to provide some directional structure the next time we gather. But until then, if nothing else is to be said and done, I will